It seems we're reading from the Loving Search for the Lost Servant, and I'm on page 8, and I don't know, we've done 11 talks, and somehow I'm only up to page 8. But
Wow.
someone told me don't go too fast, so I'm giving this a slow reading. But let me see if I can get my e-book on the screen so I don't have to look down. Here we go. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj was talking about faith. And he's really sort of going through this shloka by Srila Rupa Goswami from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he says, Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha Tabhajana Kriya, like that. The idea is one begins with faith. And so he was explaining the idea of faith. And he says, of course, even if we're going the right way, it is never certain that the path will be free from obstacles. So one of the big obstacles is ego. And after bhajana kriya, there's the problem of anartha nivritti. You have to get rid of unwanted things, anarthas. And anartha is an interesting word because uh, the general Vedic idea of dharma is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. This is sort of a thread that runs through many different aspects of the Shastra. There's Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra, and Moksha Shastra. So the idea is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. First, there's duty, then wealth, then a nice family life, and at the end, liberation. Or somebody else put it, you work hard, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's getting artha, right? Friday night is kama, good sex. And then on Sunday, you get dharma and moksha. So here we are looking at dharma. But this is kind of superficial in the sense that Vaishnava Dharma is really Paramahansa Dharma. Paramahansa is a kind of a swan-like soul. The swans are supposed to be able to separate milk from water. So, of all the different sort of milk products that are offered in the scriptures, the swan-like souls, they extract the sweetest nectar from that. So they're Paramahansa, swan-like souls. So while the general concept of religion includes artha, we're trying to go beyond that. But in any case, artha, generally speaking, it means wealth. And anartha would be an obstacle towards wealth. So if our spiritual wealth uh, involves giving up the ego and devoting ourselves entirely to God, Krishna, then the obstacles on the path uh, would be our own ego. We don't. We sometimes like to see our friends as being obstacles because they may stab us in the back or force us into difficult situations, uh, make us work hard, take credit for our work, and then cast us aside. But our obstacles are never really other people. The obstacles on the path have more to do with our own internal resistance to surrender. So Srila Sri Ramakrishna said, of course, even if we're going the right way, Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha to Bhajana Kriya, and then Anartha Nivritti, get rid of these obstacles. Even if we're going the right way, the path will never be free from obstacles. Even if we're making progress, unexpected hindrances may trouble us and delay our advancement. Though we may see many around us falling or retreating, we must go forward. Also, it's not our business to find the faults in others and spend all our time trying to correct the faults in others. Physician, heal thyself. Though we see many around us falling or retreating, we must go forward. We should have the conviction to think that although many began with us on the path and are now going back, we shall have to go on. We shall have to strengthen our energy and go forward, alone, if necessary. Our faith should be so strong that we have the conviction to go on alone, if necessary, and by the grace of our Lord, cross whatever difficulties we find on our way. In this way, we must make ourselves fit. We must develop exclusive devotion. Of course, we shall always try to find good association. Sometimes it may seem that there is no association, that we are alone. Still, we must go on and search out the beacon light of the truth. Progress means eliminating one thing and accepting another. So this is, again, this is very sort of Hegelian. In order to make progress, one leaves something aside and accepts something new, and that will lead us on a new path. And then again, we may have to leave something aside and accept something new. So this is my comment. Rupa Goswami points out, Anukulyasya sankalpa, Patikulyasya varjanam, Rakshasyatati vishvaso, Goptrite baranam tata. He says, the 6 divisions of surrender are the acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service and the rejection of unfavorable things. So this idea of leaving some things aside and accepting others is really quite difficult. How do we know exactly what is an anartha? What do we mean by obstacles on the path? This is something for self-reflection. It's not that you can go to the guru and ask the guru, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? You can to some extent, and the guru will tell you based on his experience and wisdom, well, do this, don't do that. But the precise do's and don'ts of divine love are difficult to ferret out. One man's nectar is another man's poison. Oftentimes we look at this shloka by Rupa Goswami and others, and we think, well, okay, here's a laundry list of things I need to do and avoid, or this is a recipe for Krishna consciousness. But sadhana bhakti is complicated in that what works as a recipe for one person may not work as a recipe for someone else. And then again, it's not simply a question of following the path or following the rules. The idea of following the rules really smacks of karma kanda, or even the Jewish worldview that comes out of the Torah, where the important thing is the law. So the idea is God made the world and God made the law, and you need to follow the law. Even God, to some extent, is following the law. It's all about justice. You do this, you get that. If you follow this rule, you get that result. Well, this is very Judeo-Christian and very technologically oriented. In order to reach a certain goal, then you have to follow the correct path. And there's a road map. So follow the map. But we're talking about Krishna who moves in a crooked way. It's not an easy thing. We're talking about God. And the idea that your love will control God, it's a very formidable idea. But how, crass, how proud of us to think that God will be controlled by your love. In the end, really, it's all a question of mercy. So the idea of following rules and conquering God by developing yourself in a certain way, it also entails a certain amount of ego for you to take that position. And surrender involves leaving aside the ego. So this is kind of a paradox. The idea that we're following a step-by-step program. You do this, you do this, you do this. It's an interesting idea. And we like it because we like to see results. But Krishna tells us, do the work. You can't get the result. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. The result is not yours. Try your hand at dedication and see what happens. Even if you look at the Krishna conscious program as a kind of step-by-step program, it's not the only step-by-step program. For example, alcoholics, they also have a step-by-step program. But those who have successfully given up their vice, so to speak, know that at any moment they can slip, they can fall down those stairs again, and then they have to pick themselves back up and begin ascending the staircase again. So my point is, this is a dynamic relationship. It's a dynamic process. What Rupa Goswami is describing is the intricacies of love, really. And he's telling you, these things will harm the loving process, and these things may increase the loving process, but it's not really a dogmatic program. For example, there's a story about the Gopal in Vrindavan. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there's a deity who eats when the boy offers him the prasadam. The deity physically eats the food, and then his parents come home and they want to discipline him because they say, well, look what you did. And so he goes to the deity and he says, look, you better eat this, show my parents. But the deity is reluctant, so he pulls out a stick. So the idea that you'll pull out a stick and discipline Krishna if he doesn't eat the prasadam, that kind of goes against sadhana bhakti. You're not to pull a stick on the deity. Huh? But there, the love is so intense that such a thing is possible. If Mother Yashoda pulls out a stick and says, "Why are you eating mud, Krishna? I'm going to discipline you now." That's her prerogative, but that's way beyond our parameters, so to speak. Uh, Rupa Goswami explains a little bit about anartha nivritti. He says, atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangas chalolyam cha shadbir bhakti pranashiti. Atyahara, this is kind of interesting. It can mean overeating or over collecting. So when I lived in the temple, the devotees were always worried about overeating. But the idea about atyahara, it goes deeper than that. It can mean collecting too many funds, becoming materialistic, or even becoming materialistic in your learning and erudition, collecting too many books, collecting too many ideas, over collecting. Atyahara prayasascha. Prayasa means over endeavoring, which means maybe it's Srila Prabhupada says over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. But it also means taking on big projects that are impossible. Say we want to print books, so we need money to buy a printing press, and to get the money, we have to do questionable things. And then once we have the press, we need to pay for paper, electricity. We need to oil the machine. There may be many different aspects of big projects that involve us in such a way that we panic and think, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this. But it's for Krishna, it's for Krishna. And we see also devotees getting angry for Krishna. And then they explain, well, Srila Prabhupada said it's okay to be angry if it's in the service of Krishna. But you have to ask yourself, as a point of self-reflection, isn't this just really ego? Isn't anger sometimes just anger? Why do I have to try to fold it into Krishna consciousness and say, well, my anger is Krishna conscious. My anger is bhakti. So these kinds of things, Rupa Goswami tells us, atyahara prayasascha, they may be questionable, and it's important to do a little bit of self-reflection and see, well, where am I on the path? Am I collecting too much? Am I really working too hard? So hard on this project that I'm hard on others and myself. I'm becoming angry. Another one is prajalpa, which is idle talk, gossip. So in a way, the entire internet is prajalpa. It's pretty much idle talk and gossip, even artificial intelligence. Niyama, agraha. This is another interesting one. Niyamagraha. It means yama, niyama. There's rules and regulations. So sometimes the rules and regulations are very good for us. Don't eat meat. Don't speculate. Avoid illicit sex, gambling, these kinds of things. These sorts of rules are good, but too much attachment to the rules and regulations may not be good. So sometimes we can even use the rules and regulations as an excuse to avoid doing the important work that we need to do on ourselves. We can use the rules and regulations to push other people away. Well, you're not following Prabhu, so I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Too much attachment or neglect. So this is interesting. Rupa Goswami is giving you a fine line to walk. Too much attachment for sadhana bhakti or too much neglect. And then there's jana sangha, association with worldly minded persons. So watch out for that. Worldly minded persons are not interested in these questions. They're not interested in the loving search for the lost servant. Just as sadhu sangha will advance your devotion, jana sangha is something to be careful with. And finally, lolyam, or greed. So Rupa Goswami says, by these 6 things, Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashyati, divine love is destroyed. So it's well worth reflecting on. Atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. You can see this also in mundane loving relationships, that one of the parties becomes too involved in over collecting or materialism or working too hard on projects or gossip or being very, very strict with some things and loose about others and associating with people outside the loving relationship or even greed. These things will destroy uh, divine love. So I just thought I'd mention that as an example of the kind of obstacles that Srila Sri Ramakrishna might be talking about. He says, getting back to the book, he says, progress means eliminating one thing and accepting another. Yet we should be able to see that there are so many others who can help us in our progress in the line of dedication. We must go forward with our eyes open. And the scriptures describe many levels that we shall have to cross beyond in our progress. By elimination, the path of progress is shown from Brahma to Shiva to Lakshmi. So this is interesting also because Srila Sri Ramakrishna would often describe the distinction between denotation and connotation. So a list of rules is like a code that needs to be applied according to time, place, and circumstance. It wants connotation. But the Puranas are explicitly written to give you millions and millions of ideas, examples, different examples of how these rules and regulations work out. So if it's said, well, be careful with money. Well, here we have the example of Lakshmi herself, or Brahma, or Shiva, and you can discover the world of Brahma, the world of Shiva, the world of Lakshmi. What kind of devotion do they demonstrate? And so Srila Sri Ramakrishna, he's pointing out, if you want to embark on a journey of self-reflection and understand uh, where where do we stand on the path, we can take a look at Brahma, Shiva, Lakshmi. He says, by elimination, the path of progress is shown. At last, Uddhava is shown to be superior to all. So take a look at the kind of bhakti shown by Brahma. He's involved in big projects. Why is Uddhava shown to be superior? Well, have a look at the 11th Kancha. And then what does Uddhava have to say about divine love according to his realization? In his opinion, he says, the gopis are the highest devotees. And from the same book that I just read Karmibhya Parito Hare Priyataya Vyaktim Yayur Jnaniyas Tebhyo Jnana Vimukta Bhakti Parama Premaika Nishtastata Tebhyasta Pashupala Pankaja Rishash Tabhyo Pisaradhika Prishta Tadvadiyam Tadiya Sarasi Tamnashrayat Kakriti. This is from the same book, the Upadeshamrita. So people will read the early shlokas of the Upadeshamrita and they'll say, okay, that's me. I don't get angry, you know. I've given up overeating and all these things. I've achieved bhakti, and now I'm ready to go to Radha Kund. But these things must be taken very carefully and with great respect. So Rupa Goswami tells us degradation. There are those in the world who regulate their tendency for exploitation in accordance with the scriptural rules, and thereby seek gradual elevation to the spiritual domain. However, superior to them are those wise men who haven't given up the tendency to lord over others, attempt to dive deep into the realm of consciousness. But far superior to them are the pure devotees who are free from any mundane ambitions and are liberated from knowledge, not by knowledge, having achieved divine love. They've gained entrance into the land of dedication and are engaged there spontaneously in the Lord's loving service. Among all devotees, however, the gopis are the highest, for they had forsaken everyone, including their families and everything, including the strictures of the Vedas, and have taken complete shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna, accepting him as their only protection. But among all the gopis, Srimati Radharani reigns supreme. For Krishna left the company of millions of gopis during the rasa dance to search for her alone. She is so dear to Sri Krishna that the pond in which she bathes is his very favorite place. Who but a madman would not aspire to render service under the shelter of superior devotees, not most exalted of holy places? Go deeper, go higher. In his talks with Ramananda Roy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu repeatedly says, ho bhaga, age kaka, go further, go deeper, go higher. There are so many who consider their position to be the highest, who having achieved a particular stage, stop there. But we find in Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita how Gopakumar, beginning from the lowest stage of devotion, gradually makes progress through different levels, and at last comes to the Krishna conception in the mellow of friendship, Sakhirasa. There, it is described how he gradually eliminates one stage and makes further progress to the highest stages of devotion. As he progresses from one level to the next, everyone seems to be very helpful to him. But gradually, their company seems to him to be stale. So, just as a reminder, so the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is taking the idea of gradation in different stages of devotion and developing that idea by showing how Gopakumar progresses. So he meets Brahma and he finds this is the creator of the universe. Who could have a deeper understanding of God than the creator of the universe, who has given us the flowers and the bees and the shining moon, the glory of the sun, all these beautiful things come from the creator. Well, the creator must really have a perfect love of God. But as Gopakumar progresses, he sees, no, there's something higher than this. What about Shiva, who manifests the spiritual energy into the entire world? The creation is nice, but in a way it's sort of clockwork. It's a mechanical thing. Shiva must be on a higher level, but even that company seems to him to be stale. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj points out, at that time, a higher chance is given to him through an agent of divinity. And leaving that plane behind, he goes to a newer and higher plane. In this way, the progress of dedication is shown in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Just as in the tangible world, there is the sun, the moon, and so many other planets. In the world of faith, there is a gradation of planetary systems. We have to scrutinize the scriptures, take advantage of the guidance given by saints, and understand how the progress of faith to the highest plane is achieved by eliminating the lower planes. And whenever there is any doubt, we should consult with some higher agent in order to make progress. So again, it seems to me that the theme running through this is the idea of leaving some things behind and then new acceptance, just as Gopakumar. He leaves behind Bhuloka and even Swargaloka with Indradev, and gradually ascends to the plane of Brahmaloka and above. These are also not merely physical aspects, but as Srila Sridhar Maharaj puts it, planets of faith. And so, following what Rupa Goswami is telling us, this sort of ascension becomes possible by surrender, anukul yasya sankalpa, pratikul yasya varjana. That means giving some things up and accepting others. Srila Sridhar Maharaj explains, spiritual reality is eternal existence, complete consciousness and ecstasy. So there's Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Mere existence cannot fulfill us. So these are different aspects also of spiritual realization. You can think of spiritual realization as freedom from material pain, existence, Sat. These days we hear a lot about mindfulness. So that's sort of the idea of Sat, simply existing, leaving behind all our different worries and troubles, and just meditating on existence. Well, this is a certain kind of realization, but according to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, this is not the highest fulfillment. Even our inner hankering and feeling, consciousness, is not sufficient. We require rasa and ananda, ecstasy, to give us fulfillment. So you can take issue with that and say, no, existence is enough. Or you can go to the other extreme, as do the Buddhists, and say, really, existence itself is a kind of illusion. We're more interested in non-existence. But if existence cannot fulfill you, then what about non-existence? Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, we require rasa and ananda, ecstasy, to give us fulfillment. So again and again, Srila Sridhar Maharaj comes back to this concept of gradation in existence, gradation in consciousness, gradation in ananda. And this is where real evolution comes into play. Evolution is not a question of one material entity gradually becoming another material entity, that a stone becomes somehow conscious, and that consciousness takes on different life forms, from bacteria and plankton to aquatic species and so on. This is not where the real concept of evolution is useful to advance our self-interest. The real concept of evolution means evolution in consciousness, evolution of consciousness. So Srila Sri Damar says spiritual realization is also different types. We have to distinguish between different spiritual conceptions. And our choices improve as we dive deeper and deeper into reality. Remember, he's also describing the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, where they begin with different approaches towards religion and then gradually take more interest in bhakti and the different kinds of bhakti until they arrive at these sort of higher conclusions that Rupa Goswami has described. He says, we have to distinguish between different spiritual conceptions, and our choices improve as we dive deeper and deeper into reality. We must die to live. And the consideration of death is also deeper and deepest. The gradation of higher and lower is always there. If we are to progress, there must be elimination and new acceptance. That's the phrase I was struggling to remember. Elimination and new acceptance. So anukulyasya sankalpa is elimination. Pratikulyasya varjana, new acceptance. I'm going to stop there. Something is smoking here, and it's not incense. There's something here on my computer that's starting to burn up. In this way, we must progress while always consulting the saints and scriptures. They will guide us in the ocean of faith. Otherwise, the spiritual world is unknown and unknowable. The absolute truth is known and knowable to a particular section, and they have given us direction. If we take advantage of that, then by the guidance of saints and scriptures, we shall gradually eliminate our faults. So I'm going to stop there, because I think that was more or less our theme. Elimination and new acceptance. So, but again, it's not my position, certainly, you know, and I don't want to get into trying to tell people, do this, don't do that. I tried that when I was a kid. When I was a young man, I thought I knew everything because I read Prabhupada's books 5 times. And then when I was distributing those books, my Sankirtan leader, Agni Dev Prabhu, who has recently left the planet, great kirtan master, I said, sometimes I get bored when I'm out there distributing books, what to do. He said, well, read the books you're distributing. I was like, wow, that's masterful. So I spent hours of my idle time reading and rereading Srila Prabhupada's books, his warnings about civilization and Kali Yuga and so on. And I became a master in telling people what to do and what not to do. And by the time I was 32 or 33, I knew absolutely everything, which puts me in mind of Winston Churchill, I think. Winston Churchill, he said, uh, was when I was 20 years old, uh, I was amazed at what a fool my father was. But when I was 30, I was dumbfounded to see what he had learned in only 10 years. You know, so when we're very young, we're absolutely convinced that we know everything. Now I'm in my 70s and I'm aghast at how little I understand about anything. But somehow it's been put into my hands the task of giving a little jai to Loving Search for the Lost Servant. And I asked Goswami, I've told you this before, that I was in Ukraine, Slava Ukraine, about 10 years ago for the Veda Life. I think it was 2014. And I was invited to speak. And incredibly, Avadut Maharaj did something to attract people because I walked into this hall and there's like 500 people there on a big stage and a microphone. And they're all seated in the lotus position, ready to hear whatever I have to say. And I thought, well, who am I? Who am I to do this? And I asked Goswami, how can I do this? And he said, well, don't beat yourself up so much. We're all flawed vessels. You know, we can carry the water that we can carry. Uh, Radharani is given a flawed vessel by Krishna, told to prove her chastity by carrying water from the Jamuna. Or I can't remember the story. Maybe it was her swagra, her mother-in-law told her this. But the joke was on her. The vessel was filled with holes. So when she drew water from the Jamuna, the water leaked out. And Krishna, of course, invisibly stopped the holes with his fingers. It was one of those pastimes. But the point being that even a flawed vessel, one that has a lot of holes in it, can carry water. So by your mercy, I'm trying to carry a little bit of water for Srila Sridhar Maharaj after, 40 years after we published that book. We hope it's still useful. Um, but my point is, what do I know? You know, uh, who am I to tell people to involve themselves in self-reflection? But one of the great things that I loved about Srila Sridhar Maharaj was that I could see that even at his advanced age, he was involved in self-reflection. He wasn't one to come out and tell everyone, I am perfect. God has put me in the position of being your master. The master is worshiped as God, so worship me as God or go to hell. No, this was not his conception at all. And I loved him for that. He was very, very humble, and he was appreciated by everyone who had this faintest dealings with him. Even the Muslims in the community who lived near the Mat, uh, they would sometimes send their head man to talk with him. And he was respected by everyone, all the sannyasis in the Gaudiya Math. So I'm doing my little bit to try to keep the memory alive, just as the folks at the Ratha Yatra are trying to bring people together. So I thank all of you once again. I know it's difficult for you to give up a Sunday afternoon for a talk on an old book, but there's Hari Priya, there's Tapanandini, there's Nazar, of course, Shivashini Meenakshi Sundaram doing what she does best, and Pranashish Prabhu himself. Hare Krishna. Any last words?
Jai Mahayogi Prabhu ki
Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you so
Jai,
much.
thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we'll see you again next week, maybe if our luck holds. And we'll
Thank
try
you,
to make some.
Mahayogi.
Thank you, Maya.
I think I'm on like page 11 or something, but I guess I'm not in a hurry because we've read, we read Sri Guru's Grace, we read Prapanajivanamritam, we read Bhagavad Gita. So if you have some time, have a look at that book and see if it does you any good. All right, let me just check the chat. There's a couple of announcements. Just says Dhanyavad. All right, Tungarasi is here. All right, Hare Krishna, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.